first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. We know that 1 o'clock on a Friday at Springboard is not the easiest time. So we're well aware, and we're hoping that this panel can, since there's not that many people, be really interactive. And so we'll all introduce ourselves, we'll have a little bit of discussion, but we definitely want questions if anybody has any. So I am Elise Lupin. I am the founder and CEO of Elysia Marketing Group. We're actually out of the Philadelphia area, and we are a full service agency specializing in food and franchise.
I'm Don Taranelli, Executive Vice President of Franchise Fastlane. So we are a outsourced franchise sales organization. We're headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska, but I live in southern Utah. I've been in franchise development for about 15 years now.
I'm Ron Bender. I'm VP of Franchise Development at French Florist, which is a retail flower shop franchise based in Los Angeles. I'm also Vice Chairman of the Vet Fran Committee. If anybody wants to know more about encouraging veterans to join franchise as either franchise owners or as employees, we would certainly love to help talk about that. And I've been in franchising for, oh my Lord, 27 years, and I get to live in Gulf Coast of Florida.
My name's Ken Osnes. I don't have as cool of a voice as Ron has there. So I've been in franchising for 20 years. I work for a company called Belfour Franchise Group. We have 15 franchise brands that we own, sell, operate, support. We've grown from 3 brands in the last 5 years to 15 brands. We have 4,000 franchisees in 35 countries around the world, and our brands are everything from things that only need like 2 speakers and a microphone to the sound system for a Taylor Swift stadium tour. So we run the gamut from low cost of $50,000 to get in all the way to $1.5 million to open the doors.
I think you got to use your mic next time. According to Lori in the back there.
I always forget to mention I'm also a franchisee with one of my brands.
This is on. Good.
Okay, so we're talking about profiling potential franchisees. So I guess we should kind of poll the audience. There's so many of you. How many people who are franchisors are emerging right now? Okay. All right. So I think we start there, where if you are just beginning to franchise, how, we have this wealth of knowledge here, how would you recommend that you start to profile your franchisees just when you're beginning, starting up? Because we know it looks very different once you're established.
Yeah. Want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. When you're new, it's hard. I've been with the established franchisors that had very sophisticated profiling systems that took like an hour and a half to 2 hour test you would take, and it would give you a percentage score compared to their top performers. It worked very well in that system, but they had 500 successful franchisees, so it is a little bit different than when you have 0 to 5, 10, whatever you all have. So I wouldn't personally recommend a profiling tool when you're just starting off. I think you really got to look at cultural fit, probably first and foremost. Obviously, they've got to meet the financial requirements, but cultural fit. Are they people that you want to do business with, that you can call up, have a good working relationship with? And are they the type of franchisee that you want to continue to bring more of? They're that profile of person. Is that the type of people you want to bring more franchisees into your system? Birds of a feather flock together. If you want to attract owner-operators that are going to be on a truck, is that person, those first few franchisees you're bringing in? Or do you want C-level executives? Well, if your first few franchisees are chucking to trucks and they're working on the trucks, but you want C-level executives, it's going to be harder to attract those C-level executives to your brand if that's not who those existing first franchisees are. So those first dozen franchisees, they're crucial to your long-term success. So be selective. Once again, hard to profile because you don't know who you want. I've had franchisors that We signed a franchisee a few years ago that showed up to Discovery Day in shorts and a Snoopy t-shirt. He barely got approved, and he was their top performer. He was their rookie of the year. He did $1.5 million of rain gutters in his first year. So sometimes you don't know, and sometimes you take a risk if you feel like they're coachable and a cultural fit.
So if they wear a Snoopy shirt, they're going to be really successful. Is sort of what I
That's the takeaway.
Right. Okay. So you can try that.
As the FranDev guy, I'm sending Snoopy shirts to all my top candidates, so that was an easy one. You want to jump in, Ken, or should I?
Go ahead.
All right,
I'll
Mike.
follow you.
I'm the one with whatever voice.
I'll
Ken
do
said I
I'll do
had.
cleanup after you.
Back cleanup, that's good. So I love the idea of using profile tools, but I like to use them to learn how people learn and how they communicate. I think they're more valuable for most brands. They're more valuable in how to train that new franchisee and how to support them long term, not as in, and one thing I hate is you didn't score the way we expected or wanted, so you're out. We can't award you. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But I agree with most of the things that Don said, without a doubt. I'm a fan of looking very carefully at what does it take to be successful in our model? What are the most important, let's say, tasks or responsibilities in that business? Now I'm looking for someone who has those as strengths, because my brand can support some weaknesses and they can hire for some weaknesses. But if they have to hire for the absolute most important two strengths, that might not be as beneficial a candidate.
Yeah, I would say I'm not a big fan of profile testing. I mean, there's some franchise consultant firms that will send you, I sent this person to you because we think that this person is this type of, model, or that's how they test on things. And I love those kinds of tests. I love taking them. I love seeing personality tests and all those kinds of things, but I've yet to find a profile test that confirm if people can follow a system, to see if they are team players, to see if they're motivated, to tell you if they're honest. Those things are hard to find. And so as I've thought through it, Ron and I talked a little bit about it, I think it helps to identify, as he said, strengths and weaknesses, but not necessarily to tell whether they're qualified or unqualified, or maybe it helps you to understand how to best communicate between the franchisor and the franchisee in that way. Something that Don said, oftentimes we found in our systems that the ones that seem to get the most questions, the ones you question the most, are usually the ones that later on you ask yourself, why did we question them in the first place, right? We have a couple of franchisees. One was 19 when he started, one was 23 when he started, and both of them had lots of headwind coming in. Oh, I don't know if we can bring these in. They haven't done business. They're not old enough. They're not mature enough, all these kinds of things. They're both, at this point, they're both 30 years old, and each one of them have been Rookie of the Year, Franchisee of the Year, and one of those two guys was Rookie of the Year and Franchise of the Year for two different brands. So you don't look too smart when you come back later and say, yeah, you missed that one. But when you got the guy that's got $100 million, you think it's everything you need, right? So I think it's, you got into this business because you trusted your gut. If you're a founder of a brand, right? You didn't get into this business because stats told you. You went, I think I can do this. So you can maybe rely upon that a little bit more sometimes. So
it sounds like a takeaway there, similar to the Snoopy thing, is don't judge a book by its cover. The people could potentially be good. So
Yeah.
A lot of times the first few franchisees are friends and family. Do you guys have any tips for if you're going to have a friend or a family who purchases, how that can go well and how that can go south, and just any advice there? Do you want to start, Ken?
That's a great question. We've certainly had brands that have been, that started off, and sure, my buddy from high school, maybe he's looking to do something, or my cousin Leroy told me that I ought to talk to Uncle Joe and that he'd be good. And so if you're lucky enough to say, here's the first 4 or 5 franchisees that we have that you could bring in, and you trust them, as long as they fit, as Don was talking about, that they make sure and fit that, if you're looking for doctors and you're getting some guy who's worked on the dock his entire life, doesn't know anything about doctoring, then that's probably not a good idea. But I think the key thing is really, of all those, I don't care who they are, the first ones you want to find some level of motivation within them, not a level of money, which we can get into a little bit later in terms of the breakdown of those two things. But that's my initial thought.
I'm gonna absolutely agree. It is incredibly easy to make a huge mistake with your first 3 or 5 or 10, or what we used to call the dirty dozen franchisees. Everybody, I'm sure that all of you have heard this before, that your first X amount of franchisees are the most critical because they're doing your validation for your next bigger group. And if you bring in a family member who you can't, or a friend who you can't make sure is motivated, then you've got a better than average shot at having an underperformer, which is going to impact your entire growth plan. So without a doubt, be very, very careful. But what I would say is, what is that person's motivation? Every candidate, what is that person's motivation? What is their goal? And will this brand be able to achieve that goal for them? That's kind of a key for me.
Yeah, I would agree with everything they said. It's not about filling spots. It's not about just getting warm bodies in. You still, yes, I would agree. You should go after friends and family. Employees is another good one of your corporate locations. If you've got some stellar employees, maybe you can help them to become a franchisee. Maybe they want to move. So you got to kind of look at all options when you're young. You just got to be gritty and hungry and find those first few. But don't just take them because they have the money or because they're willing to roll the dice on it. You've got to make sure, to Ken's point, do they have the motivation? Do they have the grit? Are they gonna make this successful? Because those first few franchisees can make or break your whole system.
Yeah, I was just going to add real quick that equation that I've heard from time to time is lots of money plus no motivation often equals litigation later on, right? They're going to be the people that are mad at you. I gave you all this money, and you promised you were going to do X, Y, and Z, and you didn't do it, and it's more headaches than you want.
I like that.
It's pretty good.
That's a good quote to write down there. Lots of money, no motivation, lots of litigation. Is that it?
Yep.
Awesome. Wow. So when you're starting off and you're looking for franchisees, other than friends and family, when you're putting together a persona, what characteristics do you think, other than motivation, what's important to put into that persona of your target audience, your perfect ideal franchisee?
I'm in the middle, so I'll start.
Go ahead.
I really like the idea of, is this candidate going to match their target customer? Right? Is this candidate going to be able to communicate with and attract that target customer? Because one of the things, if you are a fan of diversity in franchising, which I hope we all are, if I, and forgive me, I'm going to say I'm white bread, if I try to open in a community that is diverse, I have a much lower chance of success than if someone who's from that community, who fits in, who bonds with the clientele and vice versa, those folks are going to have a much better opportunity. And it's the same thing, if I'm a sales organization that is targeting C-suite, I'm not going to look for a guy who just worked on the dock as somebody throwing boxes around. That's going to have a much harder fit.
You reminded me of something. Obviously it's important to be asking lots of questions to these folks. I remember working with a candidate that I thought, why on earth is he interested in our brand? He's like, I can't remember exactly what he was, but he was like this high-end, lawyer guy. His wife was a doctor, and it was like one of our kind of blue-collar brands. Nothing in my description of the materials that I got on him said anything about what I'm going to tell you now. I said, why are you looking at this? And he said, well, my dad owned such and such when I was a kid, and I loved going and working in this shop and doing that. And there was that heart pull to that, right? And I never would have, I was going to discount the guy and go, in essence, you don't fit our profile, we're throwing you away. But as soon as he said, I work with my hands all the time and I want to get back to basically the grassroots. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I would just add or piggyback a little bit in that, what are the core skills that are needed to execute your business model? Do you have a cookie shop that's going to have a bunch of high school and college kids? Are you going to be selling to C-suite? Are you going to be going into homes and selling people a home service? So, and then what can be hired and what has to be done by the owner, in your opinion, as you're starting off? And then do they have those skills that you know, those hard skills that you know are going to be required? At least today, you know what's required for the business. Now that might evolve in 5 years. You might realize, yeah, we can hire a salesperson in the beginning. But if you sold in the beginning and you got the business off the ground by selling, you probably need to bring somebody in that can sell, because that's what's proven right now, is that the owner has to be the one out doing the sales. Once again, eventually you might start proving out that you can hire salespeople, but you really understand what's the core competency of the owner. What do they need to be good at? Is it managing high school and college kids? Is it managing a sales team? Is it doing sales? Is it you've got a business where they got to be on a truck doing the actual labor? So really understanding that, and then making sure that those hard skills these first franchisees have.
I'm sure we all have stories and cautions. I worked with a brand that was targeting what they perceived to be as this perfect candidate. They were looking for very, very high-level corporate refugees, folks who have been senior executive vice presidents at Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola or IBM or those kinds of brands. And they were bringing that person in to manage a team of like 3 people in a retail/service store. And what they found over the years was that those folks were absolutely great at managing a team of people who would then go do stuff. But those people were no longer suited to doing stuff themselves. And the model did not support having those teams to get out there and do stuff. So, be careful that, as Don says, that the person doesn't yet or doesn't still have the skill set that you desperately need for success in the business.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about trying to do any kind of profile, whether it's just you're going, these are the kind of people we're looking for, or whether you're doing some sort of testing, is, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many of the things that are hard to define. Like, I think one of the great things to profile on somebody is, do they have the attitude when they come in to say, I'm going to join your franchise because I don't know how to do this, as opposed to the guy who comes in and says, I don't need you, I just need your leads. I just need such and such. I've built this, da-da-da-da-da, I'm smarter than you guys are. And there are people who are smarter than you, but the ones who are really smarter than you are the ones who are smart enough to say, I am smarter than you in these areas, but I'm going to trust your model and trust because you guys have done this for a while. And those are the things that are hard, especially when your salespeople spend such a short period of time with them, and you really don't know exactly who these people are. But that's one of the things why it's important for the brand president or the founder to say, I'm going to do an interview with these people too, and so you can kind of catch those things about what they're really about. So,
can I digress for a moment? If
Yes.
I'm going to mention Discovery Day. It's not really the topic here, but if you're a person who believes in Discovery Days, I love Discovery Days, and I would much prefer that they were in person. I know they can't always be in person, and it's not suitable for every brand. But one of the benefits of being in an in-person meeting or Discovery Day is that you get to see how they interact with other people. And one of the oldest tricks in the book is to take them out to lunch or dinner and see how they interact with servers. Because guess what? That's how they're going to interact with your support team. These are the very, very simple tips and tricks. If you don't like spending time with them, you're not going to like supporting them. That doesn't mean they won't be successful, because the most successful ones, in my experience, have been the biggest pains in the butt. But you put up with that for the success, right?
yeah.
Can we stick with that digression for a minute? And
Yeah.
how do you take your client profile and structure your discovery day to get what, my dad had the same thing. Like, he would send somebody in his office out to look at the cleanliness of someone's car when they showed up for an interview, right?
Yep.
Because if you show up in a dirty car, even if you're not taking anyone in there, that's what the rest, in his opinion, that's what the rest of your life looks like.
Right.
How do you structure your profile, your discovery day to get what you want out of the answers that you need out of your discovery? Does that make sense?
Sure. Sure. The first thing is, and I think everybody in franchising agrees, you want to see if they can follow the system. So can they follow the simple directions of, this is the time we want you to be there? And by the way, dress is business casual, or it's whatever it is, right? Did they fulfill that, or did they say, gee, I want to impress you a little more, I'm going to be there early, or I'm going to dress a little nicer than you said? Those kinds of things are kind of, I think, the first simple things to maybe consider. But the more, so I'm a believer, I'm the sales guy, I don't have a sales team right now, it's me. and I believe that I need to be in the discovery day almost every single minute because I'm the translator. Sometimes the department head who comes in and talks marketing or talks this or talks that, and they don't speak the same language as the candidate does, and I have to say, here's what they mean. Oh, right? But every different person that comes in, you get to see how the candidate absorbs information from that person. You can see their body language. You know, are they, because it happens a lot at Discovery Day, which means I'm much smarter than that person. I'm going to do it my way. So, you know, you give them a lot of opportunities to interact with different people. Maybe you take them out to lunch. I worked as a consultant with a brand that took people out bowling the night before. Why? Bowling was not part of the business model, but it's just a way to get to know people better. You know, are they going to order drinks at lunch? I saw one franchise where they declined a candidate because she double dipped her chip in the salsa. Swear to God, that is not a joke. That's what they did. Yeah, and they would brag about it for years. They kept talking about that. But
Another good takeaway.
yeah, there you go. No double dip.
Snoopy shirt and don't double dip. Okay. How important is culture, and how do you determine if someone's a cultural fit?
How can you know do you know what your culture is right now? I hope you do. Good, because as long as you know what your culture is, you know, it's much easier to figure out if they fit, right? But I don't know.
Well, I was to piggyback on what you said, Ron. I think the importance, especially once again, to these first few franchisees of meeting them in person, whether you have a full-blown discovery day, whether you go have coffee with them, dinner, I think culture is a lot harder to evaluate over Zoom. I think spending time with them, going out for a meal, seeing how they conduct themselves with the staff, with the drinks, just all those things. I think you've got to get in person with them. And once again, with the importance of those first few, if you just meet, if I was an emerging ZOR, I would not sign one of my first 5 franchisees if I had not spent time with them in person.
Yeah, I would say the 4 things everybody always looks for in franchising is competency, right? Do they seem like they could do the job? What's their character like, their personal character? Culture, which is a little more difficult to define. And then the other one's cash, right? On that list of those 4 things, the only one you can get in less than 7 days is cash. Everything else is harder. I mean, that's why you're relying on your sales guy to go, okay, you've spent 3 weeks talking with this guy, tell me more about him, write up a bio, we want to see these kinds of things. But yeah, a lot of that stuff you can't catch until they're actually there, and you go out to dinner with them and go, yeah, you know, they kept looking away while I was talking, or we came in and they went up to the hostess and they were super friendly and nice, rather than, well, we need a table for 4. How quickly are we going to get that? You're like, this guy's probably not going to be a good employer and a good salesperson or whatever that is. So yeah, it's, you know, finding good franchisees and finding great franchisees, in my opinion, is like the difference between brushing your teeth and pulling them. It's a big difference. And as you're trying to build your first franchise group of people, for one of the things I'd tell everybody is give yourself and your team a little bit of grace. Because like if you played baseball, well, you know, I've talked to business leaders and had, you know, lunches with like guys who wrote books on how to find great employees and all those things. And when you get down to it and you go, so what kind of success have you had? What is it? What's this magic trick that you have? And they go, I don't care. You know, I don't care who you are. I'm 50-50 at best, right? If you bat 500 with
you're a Hall of Fame in a big way.
You're a Hall of Famer if you bat 500 with your selection. And sometimes you're going to be God and you know it all and you got it. And other times you're going to be the dumbest moron and you go, man, I'm so glad I let my team talk me into this. So I'd try to ask your operations team, ask your receptionist, what did you think of this person? Ask every single person that they interact with, because they're going to be one way with you, right? But they're going to be some way different with somebody that they think's a peon, if you will, in the organization. So anyway, Don, go ahead.
I was going to say, at least if I could follow up on this gentleman's question here earlier about how do you design discovery day to evaluate. I would say you need to start evaluating well before Discovery Day. You need to design your whole discovery process to where they might even not get to Discovery Day because you determined in the process much earlier than that. So, and I wasn't suggesting that that's what you're referring to, but the whole process is designed to evaluate, can they follow a system? Are they showing up for calls? Are they doing their homework? Are they sending you their verification of funds? All these things that you're asking them to do throughout this whole process leading up to Discovery Day is to help determine, I mean, even if you invite them to Discovery Day or not. And so I think it's not all just about Discovery Day. We've got to evaluate them through the whole process from the first call.
Yeah,
Lori.
absolutely.
I think, and I'm going to use post-COVID, because I've always, and I think it works better, to have people come in person for Discovery Day, the Tuesdays, and everyone calls. But I think post-COVID, I can tell you that I went more virtual. And I think qualifying, you're right, in person makes it better, but in speed, it worked better for me. And we never went back to all, not, because some people still want to come in.
Right.
And they want to meet you too. But I think that we do a lot more virtual now than we do in person. And I want to know what percentage or what your opinion.
Yeah, so at Franchise Fastlane, we have about 24 brands. I would say about 25% of them will accept virtual confirmation days. Some still do it exclusively post-COVID. Some will do it on a one-off basis. Most are still require everybody to come in person. I think it also depends a little bit on where you're at as a brand. When you've got 100 franchisees, you can take a little bit more risk. Even 50 franchisees, you can take a little bit more risk. But I know some brands and some developers are like you and feel very strongly that you can evaluate people virtually just as well as you can in person. I'm a little biased towards in person, and I recognize that. I've always encouraged all of the brands that I've worked on to do in person, with exceptions for virtual for various reasons. But at the end of the day, you know, once again, if you're batting 500, you're doing pretty good. So if it makes sense, but also from a franchisee perspective, I'm always quite shocked that franchisees are willing to write a check for $50, $100, $150,000, sign a 10-year contract without meeting somebody in person, shaking their hand. So I think about it also as my bias that way. I would never do that. Before I write a check for that kind of money, I'm gonna wanna meet the people I'm going into business with for the next decade. But, I mean, we've signed hundreds of franchisees that have been willing to do it virtually, so.
And we're
who
all
knows?
old school, younger franchisors, younger.
Speak
teams
for you and me.
probably.
Don's not that old,
Excuse
but
me. Ken and I have been around for a while. But, you know, you have a lot of opportunity. There's times, and if you haven't seen this yet, you will, that if you have a team, and you guys might not even have a team. We're here up talking about, you know, the receptionist and these people, and you might be like, that's just me. I'll change my hat. But there's times when your team will say, I love them, I'm not sure, I don't like them at all, and we'll spend the money and we'll fly our butts out there. If they've already come to us once, we're gonna go out to them once, and we're gonna, because so an airline pilot has to bat 1,000, right? I, as a franchisor, if I batted 500, I would be out of this business in a heartbeat, because I couldn't stand the idea of half of the people that I allowed to come in and invest got screwed. I couldn't handle that. Yeah. So I'm gonna spend more of my money, if that's what I have to do, more of my time to figure out if I've got a better shot at that. I'm not gonna accept a 50-50.
I also think it's a little different. So for those who don't know Lori, I mean, she works for a brand that is, you know, a pretty large brand, and she's been doing it, sorry Lori, not to out you, but for a long time. So she may be able to vet someone over Zoom fairly quickly because she has been doing it for so long. So I think that's a little bit of a difference, as well as an emerging brand who doesn't have as many.
I do think it's better for you to come in. I absolutely will vouch that I think it's better for you to come in. I think that people have schedules, and it just started moving. And I think that is why, and it was all over COVID, so we can all blame COVID. But I think, because everybody used to come in before COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
But membership. It's not like, hi, do you want to come to a meet the team day or a discovery day? You're spending a lot of time with them through the process. So to me, discovery day, it starts from the beginning, but it's like a green button or a stamp that vouches that you want to take them to be a part of your family.
Right. I think I'm going to ask one more question that I think will be interesting, and then hopefully we can get questions from our robust audience here.
Yeah.
Can you guys, and you've already touched on this a little bit, but what are some real, like, red flags? Like, tell some stories about what you've seen through your years of franchising when, you know, you immediately, and I'm sure this is going to be quite interesting and maybe kind of funny, but I also think it would be helpful for people to hear, you know, when you know, oh man, this is a definite no, because.
I can start.
No one's recording this, right?
The biggest red flag, the biggest red flag to me is my spouse not being on board.
Yep.
Right. So back to the discovery day, it's super important to get that spouse to be a part of that. We had a guy a number of years ago that his wife just was totally against it, and I said, you can't come unless you bring her along. And the crazy thing was, after he left, and his wife sat there the whole day with her arms crossed, and you could just tell she did not want to be there. It was like she was forced to go. He called me from the airport and he goes, you're not going to believe this. Not only is my wife in favor of me doing this now, but she's jealous that we don't live in your town because she would love to work at the corporate office on your team there. But that's a good side of the story. The bad side of the story is spouses kill it, right?
Did you hire her?
Well, they didn't live there. They lived in New York somewhere. But
Don't you know any good realtors? Yeah. So I've had that situation, and those usually blow up before Discovery Day. Those usually are the ones that, hey, you know, does your spouse want to be involved? We'd like to bring them on the calls, make sure that we can get their questions answered, you know, firsthand, rather than you having to go back and whatever. Oh no, they said it's okay, whatever. It's all my decision. And then, you know, we invite them to Discovery Day, and they're like, yeah, my wife says absolutely no way. She said, like hell, you're doing this, whatever. But the other one that I really learned to run away from was daddy deals, where mommy and daddy have the money and they're going to put Junior into business, and Junior has absolutely no sense of responsibility and can't get off his butt and wake up to go to work. Oh my gosh, we see it all the time. Sometimes it works out. Could that be 20%?
yeah. Don, you got any good stories?
So we had a confirmation day about, we call them confirmation day, discovery day, whatever you want to call them, about 4 years ago. And the water got shut off in the building for whatever reason. And I needed to use the restroom. I don't know why you can't use the restroom, even if the water's not off, even if the water's off. But instead, he goes right in front of the secretary's window and relieves himself.
That's a red flag. I like that one.
He did not get approved.
If I could. Yeah.
I had a person that I thought was perfect for a system. Perfect. Okay? And we brought her in for the discovery day, and she was lovely. And she had a special needs child. And this was a senior care grant. She told us that she put her child in a trash can. Well, everybody went, a trash can? She said, I didn't put the lid on it. But that's what her psychiatrist told her to do. So I just envisioned a senior care grant that everybody's going to be in the room in trash cans. So that's what we had to turn her.
Yeah, good.
Red flags that you wish you hadn't blown through or gone past, like, you know, peeing in front of the secretary, trashing your kid. These are funny stories, but I think maybe what would be more valuable for me is like, what are the ones that you're like, you just like, man, I can't, like.
They
I
weren't
would
blatantly
say-
obvious, like
Maybe they're obvious in the moment, or maybe you decide to blow through them and you wish you hadn't, and now it's kind of a more hard and fast rule that you don't. Like some of those maybe more nuanced ones.
So I'd say,
Say a little bit on your question, or maybe those red flags that we don't pay attention to, things that we just look over, you know, and we don't, oh, we should have looked at that.
so I,
Like them looking you in the eye.
For example.
Body language and things.
Yeah.
So here's something I would say, and this actually goes really well with what Ken had said. When you get the guy with or gal with really deep pockets, very successful career, $10 million net worth, whatever it is, we get excited. That person has been very successful in their career. You've really got to drive down on the motivation piece. Like, I mean, you've made it. You just showed me your $10 million net worth. Why on earth would you jump back into business ownership and get in the weeds again, work 50, 60 hours a week as an entrepreneur? What's going to drive you to do that every morning? I think we get excited about those people for obvious reasons. They've been successful. They have the money to be successful. But do they truly have the motivation to do what it takes? Business ownership is hard. And are they going to get out of the bed and do those hard things when financially they're fine? They don't need to anymore.
Yeah, it's basically asking the last 10%, right? That's what people talk about. What's the question that I know might blow this deal up?
Yeah.
For me as the sales guy, or if I'm not the sales guy, but I'm sitting in with my sales guy and I'm like, oh, he's going to hate me because I'm asking this question. But you should. Josh?
To answer the question about red flags to ignore, I send out materials to review prior to each call, videos to watch, things to read. And I always ask, hey, did you get a chance to watch the video? If they didn't, they're not doing their homework. They're not.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Motivation, whether they just don't care, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And how they act in that process is a very good indicator of how they're going to be as a franchisee. And they're not going to do what the support staff asks them to do. So
That's a wise man right there. He happens to be on my team too.
So,
but,
all right, hold on a second though. Yeah, right. Hey, yeah. I'm going to push back on that one because, as to your point, what red flags do we not look for? What red flags do we maybe overreact to? And I know years ago, everybody in franchise development said, you give them hurdles between calls, go over that hurdle. I want you to fill this out. I want you to read this. I want you to take this video or do this profile test or whatever. And if they didn't do it, they weren't following the process, therefore they're not going to be good franchisees. And I'm sure that a lot of the times is the case, but I think sometimes I have blown past that and said, this guy I've come up with my own excuses for them. This guy's busy, this guy's this guy's that. And I finally learned to ask them, oh my gosh, this was pretty important. Was there a reason that you weren't able to do that? And sometimes, and actually a pretty substantial percentage of the time, I find that it's because they are so invested in what they're already doing, because they're great damn employees, and they're busy, and they owe their loyalty to their existing employer until they leave that employer for the franchise or whatever. And I'm much more impressed with that. Or I don't know if you guys ever have issues in your personal life where I'm not even going to say that one, sorry, where you've got an issue with family, somebody getting sick, something happens. You know what? I didn't watch the video, and here's why. I have no problem with that. Please make sure that you watch it before the next call or something like that. So, yeah, don't overreact. Make sure that you're.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So we got two really good information, like initial Zoom meetings with two individuals recently, and they were spectacular prospective franchisees. And both of them came, like the spouse wasn't on the meeting at all, and then they both came back saying their spouse isn't in agreement with this. And of course, I wrote a nice letter back and said if you're ever interested in the future. But what do you usually do? Do you just usually end it there, or is there any
I got one
other
here.
suggestions?
So was your process, was that the first and only step that they actually took?
Well, it was like emails beforehand.
Right.
And it's like an hour and a half.
Great. So I try to make sure that people know up front that anyone that's important in the decision process, we would love to have them on as many of these calls as possible. And I will tell people it's because we want them to get their questions answered by me, the expert, rather than having to talk to the spouse or whomever. But the reality is, if that first Zoom call and they said no, they're they're not interested at all, great. Why don't you have them come on and we'll do a 15-minute conversation just to make sure that they know exactly what it's all about, get their questions answered, and if it's not right, it's not right. I wouldn't just say, hey, thanks anyway, let's talk about it in the future.
You definitely don't want to have the spouse selling it for you,
Right.
Because they've already got all their internal biases that are already, for lack of a better way to put it, stacked against your spouse. I don't know, that sounds,
Here's another thing. I love to tell stories. Those of you who have seen my presentations before know that I won't shut the hell up. So do my friends here now. But I get to do these franchising 101 presentations for VetFran and the Diversity Institute. And one of the things I tell is my crab story. Anybody here ever been crabbing, blue crabs, Chesapeake Bay kind of thing? So I'll tell this story. If you catch one blue crab and you put them in a big old bushel basket, that crab will be out of the basket so fast you can't even see it. But if the bushel basket is full and you put another crab in, not one crab will get out. Why? Because all their buddies pull them back down. Now I say that and then I explain that if you go to the family picnic with Uncle John and say, hey, I'm thinking about opening a business, it's going to be this. Uncle John, who doesn't have the, and I'm going to say here, guts, I don't say that in this presentation, they don't have the ability to do that. And so they're going to say, oh, you shouldn't do it. You're not going to have benefits. Nobody's going to pay you. People don't eat that here. Our area is different. And that's absolutely a normal case. So I prepare my candidates up front for that.
I was just going to say, Thanksgiving is the biggest killer of franchise deals.
Absolutely. That's why December's bad. It's not that people are so busy. It's that mom and dad and Uncle Joe say no.
If I could clarify a statement I made earlier about batting 500, when I'm talking about batting 500, I just want to let you know, I'm not talking about that they fail. I'm talking about when your goal is to go, I want killer franchisees, I want everybody to be top of the line, but and I say give a little bit of a grace to yourself in terms of that. You know, the old Pareto principle known as the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your people are going to be 80% of your top producers, and there's probably some truth in that, and I'm sure some of that's just made up to a degree, but I also agree in the Sturgeon law, which is 90% of everything is crap. And if you'll look and go, you know what, I'm going to have some bad franchisee. I don't care if every franchisee of yours is great. You know what we all have in franchising that we all share is we all have 10% of our people who are our bottom producers.
Right? There's always going to be.
They may be millionaires,
Yep.
but they're still the bottom 10%, right? And so my point was just try to realize that everybody isn't going to be a killer, and you don't want a killer in your entire organization either. You don't want the guy who hits nothing but home runs when you need somebody to steal some bases from time to time or play good in the field. So,
One other thing from a marketing perspective, because I can't help it, for a lot of the franchise brands that we work with and we do Fran Dev with, we'll keep, if they reach out and they're not interested, we'll occasionally send emails with what's going on with the brand, because you don't know what's then changed in their lives, right? Like maybe a location has opened up.
I was thinking that. I knew I shouldn't say it. Though.
What?
Maybe they got a divorce.
Well, yeah. Or maybe they came into money. Yeah. Or maybe they came into money. Or maybe there's a location open that they really want. So it's okay to tap that well occasionally. I wouldn't constantly send emails and whatever, but we do that often where it's kind of like reminders periodically to the list of people that have reached out.
We do always, I really try to encourage them to bring them to the discovery day, so that works out really well. Too, but if they end it before that, that's a problem.
Yeah.
If you end up signing somebody that's kind of similar to them in a month, 2 months, 3 months, I would even send them a quick background on this person. Hey, I remember talking to you. I really enjoyed our call. We just signed Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and they reminded me of you. I thought you might want to see their bio and their background.
That's a good idea.
great idea.
That is a good idea.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind sharing, if you have best practices when you do have to say no. No. Right?
My favorite thing to do personally is to talk them out of it rather than tell them no. Occasionally you do have to just say no, but a lot of brands want pretty sales heavy individuals. I find a lot of our brands in particular. So in those, it was like, wow, Mr. Johnson, it doesn't seem like I'm looking at your resume here, you've never done any sales. It looks like this brand is pretty sales heavy. How do you see yourself getting out and cold calling businesses or, X, Y, and Z? Is that something that you feel comfortable with? Well, I was thinking about hiring. No, we really think the owner needs to be the one out pounding the pavement doing the sales. You really see yourself doing that? Have you ever done that before? Have you managed salespeople before? Like the reasons we don't like, unless it's just like the person's a jerk, if they're missing core hard skills, show them that and then put it back on them, and hopefully they bail out is always my preferred way.
And I'm not shy. I'll say, it doesn't really seem like you're a good fit, but I'll actually say, I don't think we're a good fit for you. And, you know, because a lot of times they're going to push back, oh, but I really want this.
It's not
They
you,
think
it's
it
me.
seems like a takeaway.
You're still using that? It's not you, it's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, exactly. We're not a good fit for what you want to do. I don't think we can support your goals. What's he going to say? Then, no, I'll lower my goals. You're out twice now.
You peed out the window, we don't want
Yeah, we don't like you. Do you have a question?
For franchisees that are multi-unit of another concept, is there anything that you guys do to judge their performance on their other concept? Or anything that you can get some kind of...
Food service brands and some others, they like to go visit a unit on the down low just to see how it operates. Yeah, that's a very normal thing, I know, in food service at least.
Can you get any tips on getting info from the franchisor side?
If you've got connections, sure. I mean, and most of us have a lot of connections with franchisors, so if you have that situation come up, you can reach out to us and we'll try and hook you up with that. But the thing I would do first, actually, is go into one of those units and talk to their managers or employees, because that might give you a little better opportunity to know how they are as a franchisee.
I think we probably have time for one more question. Does anybody else have any other burning question? Any last minute tips that you guys want to
Well,
share?
first of all, I just want to say, I think there's like 30 people that showed up here, which is way above the number the over-under that I was predicting based on the time we got this. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you being here, and if there's anything we can do, we'd love to, we'll give you our information and love to help you out.
Yeah.
Good job.
That was fun.
And Elise made this fun, so we really
I
appreciate
tried.
that.
It's Friday, we're all exhausted, you know.
And by the way, although I've worked with big brands, platform brands, legacy brands, right now I'm an emerging franchisor with 3 corporate units open and 2 brand new franchisees who are not yet open. So I'm in the same boat you're in, and we've all been there, maybe, Don probably 6 times this week. So we've all been there. If you've got questions, we probably have silly ass answers. Thanks, everybody. Right, no double dipping.
Yeah, right.